My home state of California, along with New York and Illinois, is among the top 3 worst states for isolating black students. And Latino students are the most segregated in California. And now with the attacks on affirmative action in states, including my own state, unfortunately, including Proposition 209 many years ago, in the state of California, many minority students are being systematically, mind you, systematically shut out of higher education. But let's be clear, even in schools that are well integrated, minority students often are treated differently. As the results from the Civil Rights Data Collection Survey showed, which was recently released by the Department of Education and supported by the CBC, it showed that despite making up only 18% of enrollees, African American students represented 42% of preschool students suspended once. Can you believe that? 42% of preschool students suspended once. This is like, what, 5-year-olds, 4- and 5-year-olds, and nearly half of the students suspended more than once. African American girls were suspended at rates 12% higher than girls of any other race or ethnicity, and most boys, black boys, were suspended at higher rates of 20% than girls or boys of any other race or ethnicity. These are kids who are 4 and 5 years old. This is simply unacceptable. As chair of the CBC's Task Force on Poverty, the Economy, and Democratic Whip's Task Force on Poverty, Income, and Inequality and Opportunity, we as task force members recognize that equal access to a quality public education, public school education, is key to lifting children out of poverty. And true equality cannot be achieved if systematic institutional barriers to opportunity are allowed to persist. It was the Thurgood Marshalls of the world, the Medgar Evers, the Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamers, the Martin Luther King Jr.'s, the Malcolm X's, and all of those unsung heroes and sheroes in our communities at the local level that really ensured that this nation would live up to its own promise and the guarantee that was laid out in Brown. And so on the 60th anniversary of this tremendous Supreme Court victory, I hope that members of this body recognize that while legal segregation is ended, yes, the laws of the land will not allow it, de facto segregation and institutional and structural racism is alive and well. Our public policy agenda must take that fact into account. We must complete the unfinished business of Brown versus Board of Education by supporting legislation and public policies and funding priorities that bring true equality and equity in education to all children. Thank you again, Congressman Horsford, for allowing us to talk this evening on this historic, momentous 60-year anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education.
Thank you. Thank you to Representative Lee so much. And thank you for explaining so well the link between poverty and race, and that they both contribute to the cause of segregation that we continue to see even today. There are those who want to suggest that race has nothing to do with it, but yet it's the de facto policies which contribute greatly to why we see kind of the resegregation, if you will. Despite the advances in some communities, there are places still in America where the dream of Brown has not been truly realized, and where communities which were advancing are now taking steps back. And I commend you for raising those points. I yield back additional time. Just
1 second. I just want to re-emphasize this very recent statistic on this 60th anniversary. Only 18% of enrollees, African American students, comprise, you're talking about 42% of preschool students who are suspended. Okay, these are 4- and 5-year-olds, and so just remember that as we debate public policy in this body. Thank you again.
Thank you. I thank the gentlelady from California. It's now my privilege to yield to the gentlelady from New York, Representative Clark, who continues to make her mark here in Congress. I am so honored to serve with her in this body, and I continue to be in awe in how you engage your constituents, how you advocate on important legislation, and how you are advancing bold ideas to move our country forward. It's truly been an honor to learned from you as a freshman, and I'd like to yield time now to the gentlelady from New York, Representative Yvette Clarke.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Nevada, Mr. Horsford, for his leadership and for being willing to be one of our distinguished anchors, along with Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who hails from Brooklyn, New York, like myself, of the Congressional Black Caucus's special hour. I want to also acknowledge the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Ms. Fudge, for her leadership, speaking truth to power at all times. Mr. Speaker, I stand here today with my colleagues from the Congressional Black Caucus to commemorate, as a beneficiary, an historic decision, a decision that changed this nation forever. Brown versus Board of Education, in which the Supreme Court held that racial segregation, the doctrine of separate but equal, violated the guarantee of equal protection in the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. The unanimous decision in Brown v. Board of Education called upon the conscience of this nation and the principles upon which it had been founded, that each of us are created equal and that we are entitled to the full protection of the laws of our land. Before Brown, the full participation of African Americans and other people of color in our public education system, which was primarily a component of our civil society, were prevented, denied almost everywhere in the United States. The promises of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, that we are created equal and entitled to equal protection of the law, were, until the decision in Brown, only words without substance for millions of people whose exclusion from our society have persisted in the century after the Civil War. Millions of African Americans and other people of color could not eat in a restaurant, stay in a hotel, obtain a mortgage, or register to vote, even though they were American citizens who paid their taxes, fought for our country, and obeyed the law. And as such, racial discrimination was not limited to the states of the former Confederacy. In 1936, after sprinter Jesse Owen returned to the United States for a ticker tape parade in Manhattan, he was forced to enter the Waldorf Astoria on a freight elevator to attend a reception there because the hotel maintained a policy of segregation. Mr. Speaker, today we have a responsibility not only to commemorate the historic landmark decision of Brown v. Board of Education, but also to understand its relevance at this moment in our history. A moment when our schools, particularly in New York City, have become more segregated by race than at any other time in the past half-century. When enormous disparities in income and wealth threaten to divide this nation, and indeed, when in many of the same tactics used to disenfranchise our parents and grandparents are again being used to disenfranchise African Americans in this generation. Today, we have a responsibility, an obligation, if you will, to build on the legacy of the Brown decision, to eliminate in our schools, in our communities, other institutions, the practice of racial segregation, whether intended or unintended, that continues to divide this nation, and to protect for every American the civil rights to which we are entitled by the Constitution. It falls on our shoulders to keep up that fight for equality and, quite frankly, to make sure that as a diverse nation, we have an appreciation of the diversity of culture, religious, and ethnic backgrounds. Mr. Speaker, I recall the words of Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who wrote that unless our children begin to learn together, there is little hope that our people will ever learn to live together. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Nevada, and I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from New York, and thank you again for challenging us